Hey, it's Pater from the Spirit Blade Underground podcast. And this is me getting ready to record the 300th episode of the Spirit Blade Underground podcast. Crazy, crazy to think about that. I mean, it's become such a huge part of what I do with Spirit Blade Productions now. And I remember there was a time where I wasn't even thinking about doing a podcast, and I did an interview to promote the Spirit Blade audio drama on another podcast, and when the interview was done, the person interviewing me said, you should do this. You should, do a podcast and talk about geek things from your perspective, from a Christian perspective, and then people that are interested in the same kind of stuff you're interested in, that would also be potentially interested in the audio drama. They'll be listening to the show, and then you can take any opportunity that you want to kind of let them know about what you're doing with your audio drama productions and stuff. And so it kind of started out, with that in mind, and it still is. It's still a useful way for me to let people know about what I'm doing with audio dramas and stuff like that. But I mean, it's become far more than even from the beginning, it wasn't like, oh, this is just my trick to get people to buy my audio dramas or whatever. I wanted to create content that would be interesting and useful and fun and, all that kind of stuff, and that would both celebrate and examine geek culture, from a Christian specifically a biblical perspective. And so anyway, here we are, episode 300. I'm getting ready to record. I've never done anything like this before. I'm still very new to just doing videos in general. I'm kind of using my iPhone to do this, and I've got it on a little tripod stand. And what I do, I've got my mixing software here in front of me that I'm going to be recording on, and let's see here. And then I've also, let me just pull this up. But what I'm actually going to be looking at, and that'll help give a little bit of extra light to me, is this. This is my script. I don't even know if you can see it, or if it's just a big white screen as it shows up on the video there. But this is a script that I edit every week to include the new content that's created for the show by me, or notes on where I insert other people's content. But the opening is pretty much identical every time, and so anyway, that's how I do it. This is some podcasters will they'll kind of like do their show completely live, so they'll have software running that then, if they have musical segues or sound effects segues or whatever, they will cue those up right when the time comes, so that when their whole podcast is done, there's no editing involved. They did all of the cues and stuff like that while they were recording it, but that's not how I do it. I record each segment, a segment at a time basically, or just like record the whole thing all at once and leave gaps in there so I know, and when I'm editing, where to find the starting and ending point for each of the different segments. So you're not going to actually hear the intro music or any of the sound effects or musical segues, anything like that. You're just going to hear me talking. The one thing I am going to do, just in case you decided that you're going to watch this instead of listening to this episode of the podcast like you normally would, I am going to try and include the segment sent in by Katja from the Netherlands, who sent in a comic book review of Archer and Armstrong. I can't guarantee what the audio quality is going to be like. It's basically just going to be me playing it off of my computer. It'll come out of this speaker right here, which I've set up close to the phone, so that hopefully you'll hear. But if you miss that part, then or if it's not clear or whatever, I apologize. Please go to the normal feed, which you can find at spiritblade.net/podcast. And or at ChristianGeekCentral.com, you find it there, or at SpiritBlade.net/underground. It's all over the place. But anyway, go to the episode 300 of the Spirit Blade Underground podcast in the regular feed, and you'll be able to hear that really well. So, okay. Now, before I get interrupted, my son is sleeping, taking a nap right now, so I got to try and fire through this before he wakes up. Otherwise, I'll just have to do some lame editing that I don't want to do. So, let's fire up my recording here. My software is good to go. Test 1, 2. Check, check. Test 1, 2. And away we go. Hello, and welcome to the Monitor Room at the Spirit Blade Underground Podcast, a biblical examination and celebration of geekery and geek entertainment, as well as the official podcast of Christian Geek Central, a website and very unique community you're invited to check out at ChristianGeekCentral.com. I'm Peter Franson from Spirit Blade Productions, producing entertainment and resources to equip, encourage, and hopefully inspire Christian geeks like you and like me to live more and more daily for Christ. For more information and some free goodies, check out spiritblade.net. All right, well, somehow today we have made it to 300 episodes. I am marking the event with a couple special things. The first is that as I speak, I'm making a video recording of myself as I record this episode. So if you'd like a behind-the-scenes look at how I record the show each week, you can go see that video now, I think. I'm predicting the future, trying to anyway here, at spiritblade.net/videos. On this episode, I'm also featuring my personal list of top 300 geek experiences I've had. It's a big list, and I'm going to plow through it, but it's filled with stuff I think is pretty cool, and hopefully includes some of your favorites as well. And also, regular contributor Katja from the Netherlands is going to share, I think that's a typo in my script, is going to share her review of the comic book Archer and Armstrong. I'll ask that next time she's going to share. Finally, we'll continue to look at the Old Testament sacrificial system and see what relevance it has for us geeks today. All right, let's get to it. And now I'm going to pause and make a note in my script. I'm going to scroll down, because as I wrap up, I may want to share kind of what I shared with you on the video here, just about thinking back to the beginnings of the podcast. Let's see here. Okay, just a couple of notes there. And scroll back up. Okay. Feature 1 in the script is my top 300 list. Here we go. Well, I should really title this my top 300 geek experiences that happen to come to mind in no particular order of preference. This was a crazy list to try and put together, and the end result is pretty sloppy. Sometimes I'll put an entire trilogy or series of something into only one entry, that just will count as one number, and other times I'll break up a series in its installments, giving each installment its own number on the list. So it's totally inconsistent in how I handle the numbering here. So in the end, there are arguably far more than 300 experiences on this list, and I won't bother explaining why I bundled some things and not others. I mean, at the time, I kind of had a reasoning, I guess, in my mind, but it certainly wasn't consistent. I didn't have a system. This list is anything but systematic. The only thing I did do was organize experiences into groups, like, movies, tabletop games, comic books, etc. Within those groups, they may sometimes be in alphabetical order. As I looked at my shelves to compile this list, you can, if you're watching the video, can see the shelves behind me. And other times, the order is going to seem completely random because something's just kind of randomly popped into my mind at times. And I would have to kind of reorder and stuff like that. So, I mean, this whole thing, it's just a huge mess. I did end up with some things that didn't make the list, but those were mostly personal geek experiences that were unique to me, like creating the Spirit Blade trilogy, which, was and continues to be, as I finish up the third part now, a hugely satisfying geeky experience when it's not enormously frustrating. Or like flying in space via the blue screen at a Universal Studios special effects demo that I attended when I was, I think, in junior high or something like that. That was fun and cool and certainly very nerdy. It felt like Superman. I will rarely give even 1 or 2 words of commentary on any of these things because I could easily talk at length about any one of them, and that would make this like a 36-hour episode. So I'm mostly just going to fly through these, so hang on. If we're going to get through them all in a reasonable amount of time, then they're going to have to come at you fast. So here we go, starting with the category of movies. The Fifth Element, The Sixth Day, The Abyss, the Back to the Future trilogy, The Book of Eli, Cube, Dark City, Daybreakers, District 9, Dune, the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries, Dune, the 1980s movie, Equilibrium, Frequency, iRobot, Judge Dredd, yes, the Sylvester Stallone Judge Dredd, and then of course Dredd, the recent reboot or whatever, The Frighteners, Minority Report, The One, The Matrix Trilogy, Reign of Fire, Soldier, Stargate, another Kurt Russell movie, Star Wars Episodes 2 through 6, and the Darth Maul fight in Episode 1, Star Trek, the J.J. Abrams reboot movie, Star Trek Into Darkness, Sucker Punch, Starship Troopers, Surrogates, The Terminator, Terminator 2, Terminator 3, Terminator Salvation, Total Recall, the Schwarzenegger movie, and Total Recall, the remake, Tron, Tron Legacy, Ultraviolet, Waterworld, Aliens vs. Predator, the first one, Prometheus, the Alien Quadrilogy, Event Horizon, Frailty, getting into my horror movies now, Jeepers Creepers 1 and 2, I'm a sucker for a monster movie, love monster movies, Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake, none of the originals, the remake, thank you, Predator 1 and 2, Skyline, Sleepy Hollow, The Thing prequel, both awesome movies, Marvel's The Avengers, Batman, the Christopher Nolan trilogy, even with the shortcomings in the third one, solid, great movie, Blade 1 and 2, Captain America, the First Avenger, Chronicle, Dark Man, Liam Neeson, yeah, Defendor, oh man, great, Ghost Rider, probably in the minority there, Green Hornet, Green Lantern, definitely some shortcomings, but I don't poo-poo it like many people do. I still enjoy many parts of it. Hancock, Hellboy, and Hellboy 2. The Hulk, again, a mixed bag, kind of like the Green Lantern movie. The Incredible Hulk, better, but, not outstanding. Iron Man 1 through 3, all really great, especially 1 and 3. Kick-Ass 1 and 2, Kick-Ass, amazing, amazing movie. Tim Burton's first Batman movie. The Christopher Reeve Superman movies 1 through 3. Superman Returns. Man of Steel, baby. Ha! Condor Man, yeah. Spider-Man, the Tobey Maguire trilogy. The Amazing Spider-Man, Thor, Unbreakable, yeah, V for Vendetta, Wanted, Watchmen, The Ultimate Cut, the X-Men trilogy, X-Men Origins Wolverine, X-Men First Class, picking up steam again here, 300, Beastmaster, Conan the Barbarian, remake only please, no Austrians, thank you. The Dark Crystal, I'm going to get flack for that, aren't I? The Dark Crystal, Dungeons and Dragons, Wrath of the Dragon God. I'm probably going to get crap for that too, but I think it was better than the one they released in theaters. The one that they released for Sci-Fi Channel, at the time, certainly, it totally scratched a very burning itch for some fantasy fiction that I thought would come in droves after the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but we got a bunch of kids' fantasy movies instead. So yeah, Dungeons & Dragons, Wrath of the Dragon God, that was a good geek experience for me when it came out. I still own the DVD. Highlander, the movie franchise, as freaking weird and messed up as the non-existent continuity is. Great, really enjoyable movies. Krull, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Legend, The Lord of the Rings trilogy, Hobbit is not on this list. Neither one, sorry. Masters of the Universe, yes, the one with Dolph Lundgren. The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Merlin, the Sam Neill miniseries. Go hunt that sucker down if you've never seen it. Pan's Labyrinth. Solomon Kane, Oz the Great and Powerful, the Underworld Trilogy, the fourth movie does not exist. Willow, Big Fish. Oh, Big Fish, man. Like Frequency, right at the... Just pulled the heart out. Oh, man. Let's see here. Bruce Almighty. Yes, it's a comedy, but it definitely fits into the kind of fantasy geek genre for me. Death Becomes Her. A zombie, I think the first zombie comedy, unless you find zombie movies that are just trying to be scary, funny. Okay, Big Trouble in Little China, gotta go see that if you haven't. That's like kind of initiation for geeks, I think. Little Shop of Horrors, Mystery Men, baby. The Mask, still a classic. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Ghostbusters, Galaxy Quest, Three Amigos in Space, baby, it's awesome. Groundhog Day. Definitely a kind of a fantasy, almost a modern fairy tale kind of thing going on there, but, great flick. The Shadow, which the new Blu-ray is coming out soon. I can't wait for. Hook. Daredevil, the director's cut. The director's cut. Still not like this amazing movie, but the director's cut does a lot of good for it. All right, so we're done with movies now. Moving on in our list to, my list, to the live-action TV series choices on this list. And we have to start, and I gotta say end, but I won't, with Farscape, baby. Absolutely. I won't bore you to tears on how awesome it is, and how it leaves all other television shows in the history, past, present, and future of the planet Earth in the dust. Farscape. Quantum Leap, great show. The Walking Dead, vying for my number 2 spot, currently battling with Battlestar Galactica. The Flash, The Adventures of Superboy. Anybody remember that? You'll notice that Smallville is not on this list. The Adventures of Superboy stands in its place because we actually got to see Superboy. Lois and Clark. That would be hard for me to watch now. I actually, a few years ago, tried to watch it again, and I was like, oh, yeah, it's better in my memory. But these are a measure of my, all-time top 300 geek experiences that I've had. And so it's not necessarily that all the things on this list are, like, awesome or still hold up, but my experience of them was great whenever I had that experience. So Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, absolutely lands on this list. Earth 2. Star Trek, and for me that would be Next Generation to Voyager. I have really no love or nostalgia or anything helping me through the original series, and certainly not enough dedication to Star Trek to make it through, what was that show called? I don't know, the one with Scott Bakula. Oh, man, that was such a shame. Anyway, Matt, yeah, I'm losing serious credit with Matt McKinney here, but it's not First Contact. Crap. It's not worth remembering. I'm going to put that out there. And you know what? I think Matt McKinney would agree with me. You can tell me if I'm right or wrong on that one, Matt. Okay, Third Rock from the Sun. Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles. Oh, man. Died long before its time. The Highlander TV series. I've got the entire thing on DVD. Mystery Science Theater 3000, awesome. The 4400, another one that died before its time. Really great show. It was all that Heroes should have been. The Incredible Hulk, Wonder Woman. Okay, now we're moving on to animated TV and movies. Starting with Final Fantasy Advent Children, crazy cool action fest. Iron Man, Titan AE, Ultimate Avengers, Doctor Strange, Gundam Wing. That's one of the few animes that I can actually enjoy. Or did when I watched it. Batman Year One, Batman Under the Red Hood, Batman The Dark Knight Returns, The Flashpoint Paradox, Superman Batman Public Enemies, Justice League Crisis on Two Earths, Superman Unbound, Justice League New Frontier, Green Lantern Emerald Knights, Green Lantern First Flight, Wonder Woman. Now that is how a live-action Wonder Woman movie should be made. Oh my gosh. If you don't think Wonder Woman is cool, go check out the Wonder Woman animated movie. It's like Wonder Woman given the 300 treatment. It's great stuff. Batman, the animated series, Superman, the animated series, Justice League, the animated series, and Young Justice, the animated series. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, the 2002 animated series. Not the classic 80s series, but the 2002 animated series. The Iron Giant. Oh my gosh. Great movie. Great movie. The Incredibles. Ghost in the Shell, Akira, Batman, Mask of the Phantasm, the Fleischer animated Superman short films, the 1990s Tick animated series, the 1990s Spider-Man animated series, the 1990s X-Men animated series, and now we're moving on to comic book series and stories. Crisis on Infinite Earths, A Superman for All Seasons, Green Lantern Emerald Dawn, Arkham Asylum, 52, the weekly series. Oh, that was great. Green Lantern Sinestro Corps War, the Jeff Loeb run on Superman Batman, the Grant Morrison run on the JLA comic book series, Infinite Crisis, Batman Year One, Batman The Long Halloween, Gail Simone's The Secret Six, Jeff Johns' Teen Titans, Hero, as in Dial H4, but this reimagining kind of reboot of the concept was just simply called Hero. It's not collected, maybe it is collected in trade paperback, I'm not sure, but totally worth hunting down if you're interested in stories about heroes in the what it would be like for real people in the real world to get superpowers. Very interesting psychologically and character study, all that good stuff. The Killing Joke, Mark Waid's Flash series, Jeff Johns' Flash series, Green Lantern Rebirth, and the subsequent Jeff Johns Green Lantern series, Jeff Johns JSA series, me likey the Jeff Johns, Ostrander and Mandrake Spectre series, John Ostrander and Tom Mandrake. Very interesting take on the Wrath of God, and surprisingly included a lot of biblical inspiration, even though he did occasionally take from other places that I was like, this doesn't really work, this is not logically consistent with the biblical sources you're drawing from as well, but still very interesting stuff. A great read. Identity Crisis, Green Lantern The Road Back, Green Lantern Emerald Dawn 2, Green Lantern Emerald Twilight, the Kyle Rayner solo Green Lantern era, minus a few social agenda Judd Winnick issues. Armageddon 2001, Armageddon Inferno, 0 Hour, DC vs. Marvel, Showdown of the Century. The only flaw in that, there's more than one flaw, but it was the victories of the people that fought was voted on by fans, so it was a popularity contest. It was not the writers sitting down and saying, okay, would Captain America beat Batman? Would Silver Surfer beat Green Lantern? There was actually an issue of the Wizard magazine where the editors of all these different comics came together and said, okay, if we didn't have to follow the fans' votes, this is what we would really think. And they were right, except for the Green Lantern versus Silver Surfer one, because Ron Mars was writing Green Lantern at the time, and he used to write Silver Surfer, and I still think he was more of a fan of Silver Surfer than Green Lantern. Of course, that was also Kyle Rayner at the time, and his ring, he was a newbie. His ring didn't work as effectively as the Standard Core issue. All right, I'm not going to get into all that. All right. The Nail, JLA Earth 2, Kingdom Come, The Final Night, Man of Steel, the miniseries that relaunched the Superman after Crisis on Infinite Earths in the mid-'80s, The Death of Superman, The Return of Superman, Superman Doomsday Hunter Prey, Final Crisis Legion of Three Worlds, awesome, that's what the main Final Crisis should have been. In fact, that's how I think of it. Final Crisis, Rogue's Revenge, both of those. Read those in place of Final Crisis. Final Crisis, crap! Those tacked on like tie-ins, awesome. Blackest Night, Blue Beetle, Batman Dark Victory, the sequel to The Long Halloween, Batman A Death in the Family, Batman Nightfall, Batman Hush, Batman Under the Red Hood, Gail Simone's Birds of Prey, Gail Simone's Batgirl, Batman vs. Predator, Superman Speeding Bullets. That's when his rocket ship lands in the Wayne's backyard and he grows up as Bruce Wayne and watches them die and he becomes Batman, so it's like Kryptonian superpowers Batman. Awesome. Very interesting. Jeff Johns' Superman run, except for when he killed Pa Kent. Idiot move. And now thanks to New 52, they're both dead. Knights of the Dinner Table, JLA Year 1, Civil War, hey! Getting some love in for the Marvel. The Ultimates, Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate X-Men, Ultimate Human, Ex Machina, Jeff Johns, Booster Gold, back into some DC now. Over to Valiant, though. Solar, Man of the Atom, just the first story arc, though. Archangels, the Saga, a Christian comic book series, very interesting and very inspiring to me. Archangels, The Fall. 2007 Martian Manhunter miniseries. The 2001 Suicide Squad series, short-lived, much like every member of the Suicide Squad in that series. It was great. From Hell. The Golden Age by James Robinson. Watchmen. V for Vendetta, and now we're into books, like the kind with lots of words, no pictures. Terry Brooks' Shannara series, the Brent Weeks Night Angel trilogy, Terry Goodkind's Sword of Truth series of books, Fiona McIntosh's Quickening trilogy, Margaret Weiss's The Soul Forge and Brothers in Arms, the prequels to Weiss and Hickman, Dragonlance novels, Frank Peretti, This Present Darkness, Jeff Roven's Encyclopedia of Superheroes, The Further Adventures of the Joker, Batman, The Ultimate Evil. Man, that was an intense one. That's where Batman basically takes on the child sex slave trade industry. Whoa, really heavy stuff. The Chronicles of the Door by Gene Edwards. Okay, now we're moving on to tabletop games. Mayfair's DC Heroes RPG, Pathfinder the Adventure card game, the Mage Knight board game, Doom the board game, Thunderstone, Betrayal at House on the Hill, Descent Journeys in the Dark First Edition. We're at 250 now, 250 on this list. 251, Hero Quest, Magic the Gathering, DC HeroClix, and now our final category, video games. Starting with Dragon Warrior, then Final Fantasy II, or Japanese Final Fantasy IV, Final Fantasy III, or Japanese Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy V, Japanese Final Fantasy II, Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy IX. Oh, man. Let's skip a little bit. Final Fantasy XII. Oh, wow. Great game. Final Fantasy Tactics, and that's where my love for the Final Fantasy series ends. Final Fantasy Tactics with cheat codes. Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, which I'm really digging on right now. Chrono Trigger, the PlayStation RPG Maker. Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Castlevania Circle of the Moon. Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance. Diablo. Diablo 2. Diablo 3. Battle for Westnoth, a completely free game that you have to check out online if you never have before. Just do a search for Battle for Westnoth, completely free to play. Dragon Quest VIII, Shadow Hearts Covenant, some great dark gothic RPGs. The Matrix Path of Neo with cheat codes because I suck really bad at anything requiring hand-eye coordination. Champions of Norath, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2, Justice League Heroes, Green Lantern Rise of the Manhunters. Yes, it's a God of War clone, but hey, you know, God of War had some good stuff going on, and they put a Green Lantern skin on it, and it rocks! God of War 2, Dragon Age Origins, Maniac Mansion for the NES, great. Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, Elder Scrolls Oblivion, Elder Scrolls Skyrim, Neverwinter Nights 2, yeah! All those games, man, those are some of the best games I've played in the last few years. Baldur's Gate, Stargate for the Atari 2600, Breath of Fire 1, Breath of Fire 2, Earthbound, The Secret of Evermore at $2.99, and at $300, Path of Exile. Another great, completely free-to-play game. If you like hack-and-slash RPGs, you've got to try Path of Exile. Completely free. So there you have it. My top 300 geek experiences that happen to come to mind in no particular order of preference. So what did I miss? I'm sure I missed at least a few things that I'll kick myself for later, but you know, you tell me, what should I add to this list or risk losing my geek credentials? Send me an email or tell me your thoughts on the forums at christiangeekcentral.com. All right, was that a little too fast? Okay, from the beginning again, a little bit slower this time. All right, so that's actually for you guys watching the video. I'm going to do a little editing thing where I'm going to first present that list, and then I'm going to digitally start making myself talk faster and faster and faster until you can't even understand it. And then I'll slow it down for the very end, probably, and then I'll cut in me saying what I just said. Was that a little too fast? Okay, from the beginning again, a little slower. I normally don't do these kinds of little fun, editing kind of gimmicks and, effects and stuff like that. But this won't take that much time, and it's the 300th episode, so. So maybe a few people will be like, what the crap is he doing? I don't know, we'll see. It's probably not near as clever as I think it is. All right, so back into the main recording. I want to remind you guys to check out the other podcasts in the Christian Geek Central Network, such as the Strangers and Aliens podcast, the Theology Gaming podcast, and the Untold podcast. This month on the Untold podcast, after the sun turned into a red giant, Sam Bailey waits for the inevitable end of the world with his family. But with time running out, will he come to terms with his past before it's too late? For more information about the CGC network, guys, visit ChristianGeekCentral.com. All right, now I'm going to play this segment from Katja from the Netherlands. Hope you can hear it.
Hey Spirit Bladers, this is Katja from the Netherlands, Comicate on the forums. Today I'd like to talk to you about Valiant's new Archer and Armstrong comic. It's been only about 2 years since I started reading comics, and since it was actually the Green Lantern movie that really got me started, I've primarily been a DC Comics girl, with a whiff of Marvel thrown into the mix to add some variety. But lately, with all the relaunches and soft reboots that have been going on at both DC Comics and Marvel, my usual batch of comics have been lacking some important traits that had kept me interested up until that point. Long story short, I ditched a number, but not all, of my usual titles and started looking elsewhere. Since I'd been hearing a lot of enthusiastic reports and reviews about the new Valiant, a comics publisher that relaunched as recently as May 2012 under the name Valiant Entertainment, I decided to try some of their titles, starting with Archer and Armstrong. Now, I knew literally nothing about those two characters when I opened issue number 1. For instance, I didn't know that there used to be a previous Valiant universe, by the way, by Valiant Comics 1989 to 2004, in which an original Archer and Armstrong duo had their adventures. Nor did I know any of the creative team, which I think is somewhat excusable given my fairly short history as a comics reader. Anyway, so this new comic introduced me to writer Fred Van Lente and, for the first 6 issues at least, artist Clayton Henry. And as introductions go, this one was great. The story. Obadiah Archer, 18 years old, has been raised by his adoptive parents to be a well-trained fighter. Now, his adoptive parents, by the way, also turn out to be leaders of an ancient sect, and they send him to what he's been taught to be a modern-day Babylon, also known as New York City, to hunt down and kill what he believes to be a demon. He soon finds, however, that this great Satan is actually Armstrong, a fun-loving, hard-drinking immortal. Together they discover a centuries-old worldwide conspiracy involving not only Archer's family sect, but also several other branches of what turns out to be one large ancient cult. Of course, the future of the entire modern-day Valiant universe depends on their actions and decisions to survive the past's greatest threat. Likes. First of all, what a great sense of adventure, humor, and excitement is hidden in this gem of a comic. I've caught myself laughing out loud several times, which for a comic is a great feat. Second, the summaries at the beginning of each issue are great. It's not just the fact that there are summaries, contrary to DC Comics, whose refusal to add plot summaries I find greatly annoying, but they are a must-read just for the way they are written. Even though a large part of the summarized stories is the same every week, Van Lente finds a way to summarize them uniquely with every issue. Plus, some of them are even humorous. Furthermore, writer Van Lente has done a great job of incorporating just enough chunks of actual conspiracy theories and religious sectarian beliefs to grab my attention even more. For instance, I've done some reading on dominionism, a belief that many Christians consider to be heretical, and I recognized elements of that belief system in Archer's family sect's doctrines. Add to that hints of modern-day theories of the Illuminati and the New World Order, and you get the idea. A job well done by Van Lente, in my opinion, for he's kept it comic-y nonetheless by also adding his own fantasy and ideas into the mix. Suffice it to say, I ate that thing up. Also, although there are definitely undertones of ridiculing the sect's beliefs, Archer himself is portrayed as very serious and committed to what he thinks the Bible teaches. And as a Christian reader, I can go along with that. For although I suspect Van Lente doesn't necessarily agree with the Christian worldview and may even view some of it as far-fetched as the sect's dogmas, Archer himself, at least, does not know that his beliefs are not biblical at all. Seeing him trying his best to be as good as he believes a person should be, therefore immediately wins him the reader's sympathy. So well done, Van Lente. Another plus is the fact that although this is not a superhero comic as such, it sort of is anyway. For along the way, Archer learns he has the special ability of perception, which in his case means he only has to see a certain skill practiced once to be able to master it himself. And by skill, you can think, for instance, different fighting skills, to name the first thing that comes to mind. Now that is a skill or a special ability that comes in handy in many a dire situation. And then, of course, there's Armstrong, not only big and strong, but also a 10,000 years old immortal. So yeah, pretty superheroical. Last but not least, great writing overall with lots of action advancing the plot. Also, the plot has themes of friendship, loyalty, love, and of course the great question, what is good and what is evil and how can we tell them apart? In short, I just can't get enough of this comic and can't wait till the next issue is out. Dislikes. I've really got no big issues with this comic. There's one remark I would make that could only be qualified as neutral, by the way, definitely not as a negative. This pertains to the artwork. On the one hand, the artists of this series do a great job of overall visual storytelling, and they also convey facial expressions very well. However, on the other hand, it lacks a certain wow factor for me. It's good, but not stunning, hence neutral. So, should you buy, borrow, or skip this comic? Well, I give this comic a quality score of 9 out of 10 and a relevant score of 9 out of 10 as well. So yeah, I say buy this baby like instantly. So these were my thoughts on Valiant's Archer and Armstrong comic. I hope you got some inspiration from it. Maybe some of you have also skipped some of the DC comics and Marvel comics, and this may be a nice alternative for you, as it is for me. I'm hoping to hear from you all on the Spirit Blade forums and on my blog comicsandgadgets.wordpress.com with blog extras like illustrations, links, featurettes, and whatnot. Background music was Call to Adventure by Kevin MacLeod, www.incompetech.com. This is Katja signing off. Thanks for listening and tot de volgende keer.
Okay. Well, thank you, Katja. I'm going to say that later, but thank you again for that. Yeah, I'm tempted to check that out. I told her as much after I listened to it the first time and emailed her back. Okay, well, let's fire up my recorder again here. If you want to help make sure Spirit Blade Productions can keep doing what we're doing or do more of it, both faster and better, you're invited to make a donation of any amount, anytime, or become a part of the Spirit Blade Insider program and get monthly exclusive goodies. For more information, you can check out spiritblade.net/donate. Just as a reminder, if you're interested in kind of getting the behind the scenes on the creation of the scenes for Spirit Blade: A World of Shadows, then now is a great time. Sometime before February is when you want to jump on board, because I send out these finished scenes monthly, at least finished as far as having all the sound effects and music. I send those out monthly. So if you're interested in kind of hearing those early versions of the scenes, you don't want to miss out. The first of that set will go out in February. So by the end of February, you'll want to sign up. It's $5 a month, and just a great way to kind of come on this journey with me and kind of hear about all my crazy, the moments that I'm celebrating, the moments that I'm beating my head against the wall. And then you also get some early cuts of different things that I'm working on. So a great way to support me and this podcast and Spirit Blade Productions. Again, go to spiritblade.net/donate for more information. And of course, you can also support Spirit Blade Productions by just purchasing one of our original sci-fi or fantasy audio dramas, and you can get all the information on those at spiritblade.net. Well, in this segment, I attempt to examine the Bible and dissect some of the churchy language we take for granted, using a little cultural history and linguistics now and then to try and get at the heart of the text so we can hopefully see and apply some of what God has for us in these words today. This time we're looking at Leviticus chapter 4, verse 1 through Leviticus chapter 5, verse 13. And like has been the case the last few weeks, I'm not going to read all this because it's very technical and dry, and it just would not be. You're going to zone out if I read all this stuff to you. But we're talking about the different sacrifices, the 5 main sacrifices of the Old Covenant era. And so today we're talking about looking at the sin offering or purification offering, and trying to figure out what that's all about and what this says about God, what it says about who we are by default, and what it can say to us geeks today. So anyway, first looking at, and this is going to sound weird, but looking at verses 3, 13, 22 and 23, and 27 through 28. I'm kind of jumping around because there's material that's kind of repeated, in different parts as you move through the chapters. So I'm kind of grouping together all the common elements to talk about them all at the same time. So in those verses I just referenced, it's interesting to note that those with greater spiritual authority, not necessarily those with more wealth, were required to bring a proportionately more valuable sacrifice. And this is consistent with the New Testament teaching that those who teach will be judged more strictly. You can see that in James chapter 3, verse 1. Now, I love preparing the In Search of Truth post and the podcast segment each week because I'm wired to get a lot of satisfaction from sharing truth with others and seeing their light bulbs turn on. But I have to admit that whenever I remember this truth about teaching, it's usually sobering to me. Not always, but it usually is sobering to me. So, I want to remind you guys to join this conversation anytime, especially if you detect that I may be saying something that doesn't line up with Scripture or just with truth. Okay, now looking at verse 3. Something that makes the sin offering stand out is its mandatory nature. Of all the sacrifices we've looked at so far, this is the first that was mandatory. The rest were completely voluntary. So it's interesting that even amidst all these descriptions of rituals and stuff like that, what we see is a God who's very interested in relationship. Okay, verses 7 and 30 now. The blood from this sacrifice was sprinkled on the horns of the incense altar. They had these kind of horns sticking up from the corners. The high priest also sprinkled blood on the horns of this altar once a year to atone for the sins of Israel, and we see that in Exodus 30, verse 10. Horns were a symbol of power or strength during this time period. So the symbol here seems to be that of God's power to provide atonement, reconciling forgiveness to Israel. Now looking at chapter 4, verse 4, it's again not perfectly clear what is meant by laying hands on the animal before it's sacrificed. We know it's not necessarily some kind of transference of sin, since this act is included in sacrifices that aren't dealing with sin. Like look at Leviticus chapter 1, verse 4. It may symbolize that here. It's possible it symbolizes the transference of sin, but this would mean that the symbol of this act changes depending on the sacrifice. So, yeah, I don't know. A more consistent symbolic meaning that some scholars have accepted is that the animal somehow stands in place of or represents the one offering the sacrifice. Now looking at chapter 4, verses 8 through 12. Unlike other sacrifices, there's no meal associated with this sacrifice. What is not burned on the altar is burned outside of the city. It seems the purpose here is not to symbolize relational interaction with Yahweh. There's no portions that are left to be consumed in some kind of like a community meal or something by either the offerer or the priests. The animal parts of the sacrifice are of practical benefit to nobody. 100% of the animal is destroyed, making this feel, I think, more like a payment or transaction of some kind than the other sacrifices do. This makes sense given that this sacrifice is about justice and about dealing with sin. So, did these sacrifices actually enable people to be forgiven, cleared of their guilt before God? Well, the Hebrew word for atonement in verses 20, 26, and 23 is kafer, and it should be distinguished from the way we use the word atonement when speaking, of atonement on a doctrinal kind of level. It's not that kafer was not often used to mean atonement, but it literally means to cover. And only later in its historical use did it take on the idea of atonement. In fact, the first time we see this word in the Bible is Genesis 6:14, where God is instructing Noah to cover the ark with pitch. Now, Moses wrote both Genesis and Leviticus, so even during the writing of Leviticus, this word still had that strong meaning of to cover. Now, all that to say that I think we want to be careful about assigning a lot of doctrinal baggage to this word as it's used here. It may refer to some form of covering sin that was still ultimately incomplete. In fact, I think there's good reasons to believe that. Although there is no mention of this forgiveness here being incomplete or imperfect in these verses, elsewhere in Scripture, the sacrificial system and the entire Old Covenant is implied or directly stated to be lacking in some way. In the Tanakh, the Old Testament, we see that in Psalm 40, verse 6. We see it in Jeremiah 31, verses 32 through 34. We see it in Jeremiah 33, 8. All that's just in the Old Testament alone. In the New Testament, you can look at Hebrews 9:15, Hebrews 9:22, Hebrews 10:4, and Hebrews 10:11. And when we're done with looking at the Old Testament sacrifices, after a couple weeks of doing some, 1 or 2 weeks of doing some topical stuff, we're going to look at Hebrews, and which acts as a great commentary on Leviticus and all the stuff that we've been looking at up to this point. The atonement and forgiveness available through the sin offering was incomplete, both in its ability to repair human relationship with Yahweh, and that's God's personal name, and its ability to satisfy justice and right wrongs. In Numbers 14, verses 19 through 24, we see an example of God granting forgiveness during this Old Covenant period, but not withholding punishment. So the Israelites could be forgiven, but were still required to suffer the appropriate punishment for their sin according to the law. So their sin was not completely dealt with. All right, now looking at chapter 5 of Leviticus, verses 1 through 13. The sin offering, or purification offering, as some scholars now call it, was not in itself some formula or actual payment that balanced the scales of justice. First, it also dealt with ritual uncleanness. We see that in these verses here. Second, if it were like a recipe for forgiveness, some kind of potion you're mixing up to equal forgiveness, well then we would expect that the animal offered would be the same no matter a person's financial situation, like the bull only because the bull has the magic blood to make the sins go away or something like that. But that's not the case. Yahweh provided alternative options for those who couldn't afford the default animal types for their offerings, for their sin offerings. So they had these alternate options so that lower income Israelites could share in this experience despite their poverty. It makes much more sense, I think, to conclude that this was a prescribed experience that Yahweh wanted his people to have, to instruct them regarding who he is, who we as humans are, and the problem in our relationship with him that we would live in denial of if not made aware of it and continually reminded of it in a powerful, frankly graphic way. At best, this offering seems to be a temporary placeholder until true payment could be somehow made to finally deal with our sin problem once and for all. And the book of Hebrews describes Jesus as the one who actually accomplished this. We see in Hebrews chapter 7, verses 22 through 27. I'll read it from the ESV. It says, "This makes Jesus the guarantor of a better covenant. The former priests were many in number because they were prevented by death from continuing in office. But he holds his priesthood permanently because he continues forever. Consequently, he's able to save to the uttermost those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. For it was indeed fitting that we should have such a high priest, holy, innocent, unstained, separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. He has no need, like those high priests, to offer sacrifices daily, first for his own sins and then for those of the people, since he did this once for all when he offered up himself." Now, it's easy to be critical of the ancient Hebrews for developing the harmful belief that they could actually do enough to get on God's good side. But the truth is that that mentality is the natural tendency for all of us. It certainly is my natural tendency. I unknowingly try to figure out how much sacrifice in my life is enough to make God happy with me. For a while now, I've sensed God's increasing call for me to give up some of my playtime. Some of that precious time that I devote to my favorite geek hobbies. I believe I've sensed a gentle but persistent tug on my sleeve from the Holy Spirit, calling me to give up some of that time to replace it with something that's more directly focused on his agenda. To me right now, it feels like I need every second of that time, and saying that openly only further highlights how ridiculous it sounds. Really, Pater, you need every second of that. But even so, as I look for where I can make cuts and adjustments, I regularly catch myself thinking, okay, I could do blank, and then that'll be enough. But when it comes to turning our attention to serving Yahweh, there is no enough. I could drop every second of my free time and live a life of constant stress and exertion, and it would never equal what Jesus deserves. Now, there are two things that I can do with that understanding of things. I can say, well, okay, I'll just trust in Jesus and remember that even if I give my life to entertainment and pleasure, there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, right? Romans 8:1. Or I can realize, alternatively, I can realize that because I have no condemnation to fear, I can feel free to explore new levels of trust and dependence on Yahweh, knowing that I will fail, that I will revert back, that I will need to hit that reset button and take another shot at it again and again for the rest of my life, and all of that is okay. Failing no longer means that I'm a failure. Because of Jesus, my record before God has no failures in it, and so I have no reason to be discouraged. I can pursue that mysterious life of immensely deeper joy that Jesus and his disciples knew, content to awkwardly stumble and repeatedly not measure up along the way as I pursue that. Now, I'm going to admit, all of that can sound a little like, motivational pie in the sky talk, but if the Bible is true, and I believe it is, but if the Bible is true, then it's not all pie in the sky thinking. If the Bible is really the truth, then our brains need to be rewired and reprogrammed to clean out the corrupt files and the registry errors, convincing us that God cannot bring about significant change in our lives, or that committing ourselves to him more deeply is just going to result in this miserable life. And I think that's where community is so vital to us. First and foremost, a local church community where we can develop friendships and spend time with others who are physically in the same place with us. It does make a real big difference. Secondly, in other communities, like, say, Christian Geek Central at ChristianGeekCentral.com. So I want to encourage you to go and get encouraged by the truth. Connect and live with other believers so we can all see our day-to-day grind in light of what our perfect high priest and ultimate sacrifice has done for us. Okay, and then that's where that segment ends in the podcast. So that's kind of an edit point there, And something occurred to me. You may notice that I'm reading from a script, and all of my reviews I read from a script, and the In Search of Truth segment, all that content I've created beforehand, written it all out. But then you might notice that when I'm reading, and I am reading, I guess I shouldn't put that in quotes. When I'm reading this stuff, I'll put in pauses, or just like I did just then, and that wasn't even intentional. But I'll put in pauses that imply that I'm thinking about my response and stuff. And you might think to yourself, is he like just putting on a show? Is he just being like Mr. Actor? But the truth is that yeah, I do bring some of that, and I do bring insert some of those pauses to imply thought before continuing on, to imply development of thought, spontaneous development of thought before I move on. And sometimes that's because I really am developing the thought and considering saying something a little bit different or expanded from what's on the script. But sometimes I'm just putting it in there because I remember what it was like writing that, and kind of how I was pausing and trying to figure out my wording and stuff like that. So, I guess I do bring some of kind of my vocal acting, vocal interpretation, if you will, in the reading of this material that I've created beforehand. But the idea there is just to bring you into the thought process I was having, the feelings I was having as I was writing this material. So I hope that doesn't seem like not genuine and being artificial, because really the intent is to express what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking and processing, what I did before as I wrote the review or the In Search of Truth segment or whatever, or what I'm still kind of processing now. So I guess there are little bits of kind of interpretational reading as performance reading, I guess, as I'm doing this, but it's all motivated by thoughts and internal processes that are very genuine, and my goal is to kind of bring you in and make it a personal experience, so you can kind of come along with me more easily and understand what I'm thinking and feeling about all this stuff. So anyway, just for anyone that thought might have crossed their mind, I thought I would share that with you. Okay, so let me pull up my software again and get recording the next segment, which is the kind of the wrap up, the incoming transmission segment, which is not every week, but I just actually, between the time that I ran out of room on my iPhone, and now 4 hours later, coming back and finishing up recording the podcast, I got an email that I was like, "Oh man, this is a great email," I'd love to share it. So let me fire this up. Okay, test 1, 2. All right, we're good. Pull this up. Now you get to see my lip sniff. I don't know why I do that. It's weird. It's really weird. Okay. Now I'm thinking about how I showed you my lip sniff, and how vulnerable and exposed I feel. Oh no, they know about one of my weird nerdy idiosyncrasies. Okay, focus. Well, just today, I got an email from Ross, and he writes, "Peter, I just wanted to say that I've greatly enjoyed your show, and it has been both a boost of encouragement for me and a lot of fun. I first discovered your show while stationed in Korea, and it helped me a lot there. I've continued to listen since I have been stationed at Fort Huachuca. I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm sure of it. Huachuca? It's one of those. Arizona. So he's in my backyard. He says, I don't know how I missed this, but apparently you are just down the road in Mesa or Phoenix, right? Man, you guys have a beautiful state, ... A little dry, though." He goes on to say, "Your segment on Old Testament law has been very useful for me lately. Next month I'm being assigned to El Gora, Egypt, in the Sinai Desert, and will have the privilege of visiting the sites where much of this occurred. I often take your segment as a springboard to study the topics further in depth to gain a better insight into the cultural and historical environment of the region. As you know, that area is a heartbreaking place nowadays, so please pray for me. I plan to continue listening, God willing, while in Egypt. Thank you for the wonderful work you and others have been doing at CGC and Spirit Blade. God bless, Ross." And I did send him back a quick reply. I'll just read a little bit of it here. I said, "Hi, Ross. Thanks so much for your encouraging email. I've been wondering if listeners have been getting bored out of their minds by the Old Testament study, so it's good to hear that at least one person is finding it useful. Also, awesome to hear that the segment has been a springboard for deeper study. So cool to hear that, as that is one of my greatest hopes for the In Search of Truth segment. So thank you again, Ross, very much. All right, guys, well, feedback, input, I want to hear from you. So request a review, give me your thoughts, questions, whatever. It all helps me to make this show better. Go to spiritblade.net/underground to record a message with your computer or send me an email at paeter@spiritblade.net. All right, well, I mentioned this last week. We're making plans to create a Christian Geek Central video channel, and if you're watching this video, it's different from the channel that you're on right now, or that this is coming from. That's the Spirit Blade Productions channel. That's more about kind of behind the scenes stuff going on with production stuff at Spirit Blade Productions. Oh my gosh! What the crap just happened? The iPhone just fell off of the stand I had it on, and everybody out in internet video land got a roller coaster ride. All right. Let's see if I can get this set back up. I don't know what in the world happened. Is that? I don't know. See if I can figure this out. I only paid $10 for this thing. It was kind of a temporary measure because I do, depending on how the stuff with the Christian Geek Central channel goes, I would like to eventually get a much better camera than just using my iPhone. And so along those lines, like I was saying, if you want to make a donation to that end to help me get some video equipment so I can put some reviews and different topical segments and stuff like that up on the Christian Geek Central channel, that would be awesome. I'm hoping to have other contributors as well. So if you're interested in contributing content for, if you have an existing channel and stuff or whatever, you have some experience in that area, send me a link to your stuff, and I'll absolutely consider it for the channel. But what would be most helpful right now would be someone to help out with video editing. So if you have any experience with video editing and you'd be willing to give some time to editing videos, wow, that would be a huge help. I am currently unable to budget any video editing time into my production schedule. The video I'm making now takes very little editing, but it's still more than I want to do, more than I really can do on a regular basis, and keep my production time consistent, my progress consistent on Spirit Blade or World of Shadows. So I'm like neck deep in audio production, so to add video production to that on any kind of regular basis is just going to be too much for me right now. So I could really use help with the Christian Geek Central content. I'll handle all the editing chores for my own stuff I'm doing over at the Spirit Blade channel. But the Christian Geek Central channel, if you're interested in helping out as a video editor, that would be awesome. Let me know. Email me at paeter@spiritblade.net. Now I'm terrified that this phone, I keep thinking this phone is going to fly off of my desk again. Let's see here. All right, okay. So, this is something that I just, my wife, Holly, is, because we're getting ready for tax season and stuff like that, so she, this time of year, always asks for the Spirit Blade CD inventory, like all of the CDs that we sell, which is really mostly just two. It's Dark Ritual and Spirit Blade Special Edition. I mean, you can get that original one as a signed copy in the collector's set, but we really just sell those two. Well, I was a little bit surprised to realize that our stock on the Spirit Blade Special Edition CD set is extremely low at this point. I have less than 10 copies left in stock. And I currently have no plans to reprint this CD. I mean, it's not out of the question, but I mean, I don't have any plans at all. The digital sales continue to dwarf our CD sales. I think that trend's only going to continue, and so it's not an appealing thought to me in terms of investment, return to invest in another run, even a small run of CDs for the Spirit Blade Special Edition. So this CD actually may never be printed again. So I've got less than 10 left, which means that both the Spirit Blade Special Edition CD set and the Spirit Blade Collector's set, which includes this CD set, are in very limited supply. I will continue, of course, to sell the digital download of Spirit Blade Special Edition, but if you've ever wanted to get this CD set, or think you ever will, now may be your last chance. So go to spiritblade.net/store before they're all gone. I'm not jacking up the prices or doing anything dorky like that. But I mean, once they're gone, they are gone. You might still be able to find a copy on Amazon or CD Baby. They have a handful of copies, but they at this point probably have fewer than I do. So anyway, very, very limited supply. Spiritblade.net/store if you're interested in grabbing one of those before it's gone. Also, if you want to get involved with Christian Geek Central, go to ChristianGeekCentral.com, click on About CGC, and scroll down to how you can get involved. I'd love to have you come on board and help this thing propel into the future. All right. Well, I think that's it for this episode pretty much, except for maybe just a few thoughts on, geez Louise, 300 episodes. I mentioned this at the start of the video, but not on the podcast. That I remember when this was just, I wasn't even planning to do a podcast. Early on, this would be late 2006, early 2007. I was doing some podcast interviews. I was a guest on other podcasts to promote Spirit Blade, the original release of Spirit Blade, and one of the podcasts. Host that was interviewing me after we were done recording said, you should do this. You should do your own podcast, talk about your geek interests from a Christian perspective. Your particular worldview and the kind of stuff you're interested in. I think there's a real, open slot or niche or niche. I can't remember how you say that. But there's fertile ground for that. And people would be interested in that. And it never occurred to me, and I thought, oh my gosh, do I want to add something like this to my schedule? I want to get onto the next audio project and stuff like that. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, this is going to be a really good fit for me, for what I want to do, because I don't just want to create entertainment. I want to, as I've been saying for the last few months, is kind of our new concise way of describing Spirit Blade Productions and Christian Geek Central. We exist to equip, encourage, and inspire Christian geeks like you and me to live more and more for Christ on a practical, day-to-day basis. And so I realized that wow, this podcast, talking about what I'm seeing and the kinds of things that are going on, the different ideas being expressed, both good and bad, in popular entertainment, geek entertainment specifically, of course. I just wanted to help geeks and help myself live more and more of this uncompartmentalized life where our faith is always kind of bubbling around, simmering. It's with us all the time, even when we're engaging in cool nerdy stuff, that we're not like shutting that off and pushing it aside, but we're keeping engaged, keeping our minds engaged, constantly inviting the Holy Spirit to, sit down next to me while I play this role-playing game. Sit down next to me while I roll dice with my buddies, and let me be aware of your presence while I'm doing that, and aware of the moment and what's going on in the moment, what I could be, learning about you or thinking about you in the moment, or what I could be doing for others in the moment, So just living that completely uncompartmentalized kind of life, man, that's something that I want for myself so much, and it's a lot of what Spirit Blade Productions is about. And so, anyway, all that to say, here at the start, I thought, because this gal that was interviewing me said, and then you can have your own, as you gain listeners, you'll have a platform from which to say, hey, we're also doing these audio dramas and stuff, which you can check out at blah, 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 And obviously, if you've been listening to the show for a while, I'm hawking my wares, pretty frequently. And so I do use it for that. I do have that in mind, but more and more it's become less of this kind of side thing to more and more of a central thing of, to fulfill the goals that I have for Spirit Blade Productions. So it really is kind of amazing and surprising to be here 300 episodes. In podcast land, that's a pretty decent chunk of episodes, and I think an even longer period of time, because a lot of people podcasts put out content more frequently than I do. I only do once a week. Some people are putting out episodes like 3 times a week, especially if you're a conversational podcast. Then you just get together and like, okay, here's the topic, guys, blah, 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 and you shoot the breeze for an hour, and you do that 3 times a week or whatever, and you got 3 shows. But I've been doing this weekly since 2007, I want to say. So it's been a while. It's been a while, but it's been really good. And I want to thank all of you guys that have been listening to the show and sticking with it as I've learned how to do a better job, especially in early days. Go back and listen. That's rough stuff for me to listen to, so I don't. And thank you for recommending it to others. I will hear stories. That people are learning about, finding out the show by word of mouth from other people. I'm not spending any money on marketing or anything for the podcast, and so I just really appreciate it whenever any of you tell somebody else about the show, even if you think it might not be their thing. You guys have helped to grow this show. I want to thank all of you that have contributed and continue to contribute, or maybe have just contributed once, content for me to use on the show. I mean, it's just... This is a different animal, completely different animal from what it was when I first started out, and that is so cool to me. I just love the involvement and the great content that so many of you guys have been bringing to the show and allowing me to share with other people. It's just been wonderful. So thank you all so much. You guys make this show what it is, and I'm just really excited to see how this thing changes and evolves and becomes better and more useful and more fun as we go into the future. Speaking of the future, well, no, actually first, I want to thank Katja from the Netherlands for sending in the review of Archer and Armstrong. Great review. You have me very curious. So I'm going to maybe dig out a couple issues of previews that have some solicitations for that and look into that comic a bit. So thank you again, Katja, for the great review. Next week, guys, if God wants it to happen anyway, I'm going to share a review of the board game Agricola, which might sound boring as dirt, but you'd be surprised how much appeal it might have for fantasy nerds like myself. And then also Hank Harwell is going to come by again and share with us a review of the Nick Fury TV movie that was intended to be a pilot starring David Knight Rider and Baywatch Hasselhoff. So I can't wait to share that review with you guys, especially you Marvel fanboys who have been really enjoying the Marvel movies and stuff going on. It's interesting to see what could have happened with Marvel properties and entertainment media had this TV pilot been successful, and it's just I think you'll enjoy the interview. I certainly did. Till then, guys, thanks so much for making time for this show. I hope you have a great week and that you'll join me next time here on the Spirit Blade Underground podcast as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. Okay, that's it. Clickety click. Now I have to edit it all. Bye-bye.